What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Pure Evil MMA. I'm your host, as always, Evil Eddie. We got a really special show for you guys planned for today. We got, honestly, one of my really good friends within the MMA scene. But before we head into that with the interview with Alex Bonwick, we got some sponsors to throw at you really quick right now. And some sponsors I'm really proud to have. Not only do we have Manscaped, which is an affiliate with the UFC, but we also have one of my favorite companies, and they even, listen, I even bought one of their products before I was sponsored by them. We got Hero Soap Company, and listen, I know it's kind of weird to say right now, but me and my girlfriend, when I bought the product, we took a shower together. We shower together all the time, and I wanted to know, like, what, yeah, I wanted to know, like, what her, you know, what her taste was, what her preference was, if she loved it. Listen, we opened up the package. Oscar, where are you? Get out of here. All right, so we open up the package, right? We're sitting in the shower all alone. She goes, ooh, I love the smell of this. So my girlfriend, her father's in law enforcement. So not only does Hero Soap Company make soap for vets, but it's made by veterans as well. It's all natural without any harmful stuff found in many mainline soaps, such as parabens that have been linked to breast cancer and male reproductive complications, which if you're taking a shower with your girlfriend, you do not need to be lathering up with anything. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's gonna, bother your reproductive complications. There's also no fragrances, dyes, or chemicals. It's veteran owned. So Sud-scribe, not subscribe, but subscribe and save 20%. Never worry about running out of soap ever again with a monthly shipment straight to your door. And guys, there's no contract. Guys, always wait until they run out of soap to get more. Usually you'll have your girl run out. My girlfriend is like, are you almost done with that soap? Are you almost done with that soap? Because she's just dying to try the other kinds. I believe I got what was it called? Men's Wintergreen. And we also got like woodsy smells. She absolutely loves it. And on the other hand, my father is very allergic to, like, I like to wear Abercrombie. I like to wear, as silly as it sounds, bod cologne. Remember Alex, you remember those bod colognes from back in the day? Like, I want your bod.
Oh yeah, dude.
So, his eyes will swell up like crazy with all that. His girlfriend will even buy hairsprays that say no fragrance. She'll spend like $23 on it. This does not bother his eyes at all. And not only that, it's helping all the veterans out there for us to be able to do these podcasts. So guys, you can save 20% with 20% of 100% of good scent using promo code PUREVET. That's PUREVET. Also, guys, we're associated with Top Affiliate, which means you guys can bet on any fight. Not only that, they'll even give you a link for the pay-per-views if you want to watch the pay-per-views. I'll have all the details down below, but let's jump right into today's podcast. I will be discussing Manscaped, which is a huge sponsor that we got as well for all the guys out there that are in the woods that don't like to shave their bottom parts. But listen, if you got a girl out there or you're single, no girl wants to unzip those pants or take a shower with you and see a Bushnell of just, your 8th grade puberty. You know what I mean? So, listen, we got Manscaped on the rise as well, linked in here with Pure Evil MMA. But we got Alex Bonwick, honestly, one of my really close friends, manager of the stars, people that, Alex, who has been on this podcast that has been under your wing, just to get listeners familiar with who you are, because you've helped us a lot.
I know most recently we had UFC Bellator Ultimate Fighter finalist and former King of Pancrase, Nam Fan, come on the show. Yeah. He gave one hell of a show. I'm fairly certain that we had Melvin Gillard at some point come on, did we not?
Yes.
I think. Yeah, so we had Melvin at some point come on, and I know Mel gave a pretty good show as well. Oh, my
God, one of my favorites.
Pardon me?
One of my favorite shows. Also, one of your close friends, Joe Riggs, came on. now as well.
Yes. And yeah, so Joe and I worked together for about 2 years, and it was an incredible time. When he and I first linked up, it was right after the UFC had cut him, when he had the incident with the misfire at the gun range where he injured his hand.
So for people who don't know that, though, Alex, that was one of my favorite parts of the podcast. I mean, as unfortunate as it is, that's like the worst luck you could ever have. Getting signed back to the UFC and then accidentally shooting yourself.
Couldn't be worse. And I mean, you know what, for a guy like Joe, who was making his second run at that point in the UFC. Now keep in mind, that was before he and I worked together, but he was at that point making his second run. He was getting on, and then boom, he has that injury happen, and it's like, oh my goodness. So when he and I actually linked up, Eddie, interestingly enough, he was, I think he was a little bit ready to kind of just back it off a little bit and kind of go, you know what, like, the UFC cut me, and, I've got this injury in my hand. I've had the surgery, so I'm better now, but I'll always have that in the back of my mind kind of thing. And one thing more or less led to another, and persistence is key in anything, as you know, just like with what you do in your show. Exactly. Persistence is huge. So, with persistence, I just basically told him, Joe, I believe in you. Like, I really don't think that you are done, and that, what if we do, I remember the exact quote was, let's think of it as chess, and let's think a couple moves ahead. And so what we did at that point, because part of why he was ready to step back, and understandably so, is competing at such a high level of competition, world class, you're talking, with an injury like that, it can be a little bit intimidating, right? I mean, for any of us. But I basically said to him, I'm like, Joe, if we do this correctly and we kind of, eat our pride, which is what it was, because he was going to fight. What I was pitching was he was going to be fighting in front of a few thousand people instead of his, 15 or 20 that he was used to. But I'm like, let's go back to the regionals. Let's get you a few wins. Let's earn you a few title belts, and let's see what happens, kind of thing. And man, I shit you not. All you need to do is look at Joe Riggs' Tapology. I couldn't be more proud of what Joe Riggs accomplished when he and I worked together. I mean, we went from, like WXC in Michigan, which no knock on them whatsoever. Do I still got you there?
Yeah, you still got me right here.
Okay. Sorry, I just talked so much.
No, it's good. It makes everything so much easier.
But so no knock on WXC, because, when it comes to regional state promotions, they're the top tier, right? Yeah. But so if you look at it, it's like, starting back there, fighting guys, and they're almost all title fights, which I love. Like, if you look at Joe Riggs' trophy room, you need sunglasses. There's so much gold in there, it's ridiculous. But so if you look at his progression, he slowly makes his way to the point where at the end of where he and I ceased working together, and it's really nothing that was, bad blood or anything. I mean, you can hear me talking about him in adoration, so it's not bad blood. Yeah. It was just a simple case of things winding down. He was moving. He was setting up a gym in, I want to say it was, and geez, if I say it wrong, but I think it was Minnesota or Vermont or something like that. But he was doing a huge drastic life change kind of thing, and I was totally supportive for it. But if you look at it, his last fight, aside from his run with BKFC, obviously, because, one thing that actually bugs me, if I can sidestep for a second.
Of course. And right now, Alex, we're looking at his record on Tapology.
It's just so many. It's like green light, green. I mean, other than that M1, which I was getting to the M1 title fight
against Boris. Yes.
Yeah. And the crazy thing about that fight, if any of the fans and listeners want to check it out, I'm sure it's on YouTube. But you'll see that Joe actually hurt himself. So in the fight, Joe shoots a double leg, and his knee essentially gives way. And at that point, the fight was more or less called off, and they gave it to the defending champion. I believe, he was a hometown boy more or less. And Joe kind of protested, and we protested and said, this really should be a no contest. I mean, it was an injury. It was like, it should be a to be continued more than okay, Joe loses now. But that's one of the things about dealing with Russia, and it's a whole different ball game over there. So, we did what we did, and we came back, and Joe had a very successful run with BKFC.
And that
now,
was the co-main event.
A lot of the listeners are kind of wondering, you know, I know I even as a guy who loves to see him fight, kind of go, you know, where has he gone kind of thing.
Yeah.
And now Joe, in his last couple fights in BKFC, he's a warrior, and I'm not going to put. I don't mean to knock on Charles Felony Bennett or whatever he calls himself.
Oh God!
But 2 for 2,
crazy horse.
He's broken his hands, right?
Yeah, crazy.
So, like, oh man. But so same thing happened to Joe though. But Joe fought through it.
Yes.
Joe fought through it, and he still got the decision win. Now, after that happened, and you know what? I never asked him, but I should have. I bet you it was the hand that he had the injury to previously, right? Because it's pre-existing. So there was some stuff went on there. You know, I don't know what legally we're allowed to say because I think it's still ongoing between him and BKFC. But
interesting.
You know, basically there's just some stuff left on the table, right? And so he can't honorably fight until that stuff's off the table. And I hope that it does happen because one thing that, like, I love what David Feldman's done with the sport. Oh my God.
Yes.
Like,
Alex, all my boys,
you know, like,
they'll be like, I don't care about the next UFC event. I want to see BKFC or Ken Shamrock's bare knuckles.
That's me 110%, man.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so much more. Was it you who shared the other day? It was like, I get more excited about when Bellator announces a super fight versus a UFC card. I think it might have been
it was
yeah, okay, dude. Like, I couldn't agree with that more. And I think that says something about, you know, and I don't mean to knock this generation of fighters at all, because I know I'm going to have a lot of young guys out there going, this guy, son of a bitch, he doesn't know what he's done. And I don't mean it like that at all. It's a simple case of oversaturation, right? And it's not any one of their faults, right? It's just there's so many incredible fighters out there now. You know, this old era, this past golden era generation, you know, because a lot of people don't know I actually fought. I fought from 2011 to 2013.
Hell yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm an old school guy. So, you know, back then, even then, there was still an element of style versus style. Now, yes, we were all mixed martial artists at that point, but you could still look at a guy and literally before the bell rang, just the way that he got sort of ready, you could tell what his background was. You know what I mean? And that very seldomly exists anymore. And it's because everybody these days is so good, right? Everybody's a mixed martial artist these days. Everybody, you know, and I remember actually being in the gyms back then, and my senseis and my coaches saying to me, the next crop of fighters will be the first cage fighters that are bred and trained to be cage fighters, which is where we're at now. So we see these fights that are just too, you know, if it was, again, I go back to the chess analogy, but if it was two chess players, it's two world-class chess guys that just can't get that checkmate. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that doesn't mean they all go that way, because we see the crazy knockouts here and there and the crazy submissions. But I feel like the overwhelming majority, the fights are going to decisions. And I feel like a lot of that just has to do with everybody's incredible skill level these days. And again, that's why I hope the young guys don't take it as a knock, because really it's not. It's basically saying that, like, back when we fought, you know, there was a real mixture. You had guys...
Well, you know,
guys,
Alex, I've talked to people like Dan Severn, and he'll be like, I believe it was Dan Severn who said this to me. He was like, you know, back in the day, we didn't even know who we were fighting until that day. We didn't have cell phones. Yeah. We had to use a pay phone to figure out who you're fighting. And to kind of backtrack on what you were saying there, I mean, this week we saw Yoel Romero get, you know, kicked out of the UFC.
Yeah,
today we saw Rumble Johnson sign with Bellator. And my point being, these are guys that have been fighting at the most elite level. You know, the UFC, you know, when I interviewed Justin Gaethje, and a lot of my listeners know exactly what I'm about to say here. In our interview, he said, not all the best fighters are in the UFC, but listen, inside the UFC, you are fighting. You know, if you're in the top 10, top 5, you are constantly fighting the best of the best. 5-minute rounds. For you to cut Yoel Romero and keep somebody like, you know, I saw a comment like Mike Perry, you're going to keep Mike Perry, but you're going to get rid of Yoel Romero. I mean, there's a lot of fans who are like, yeah, he deserved to go. Chris Weidman, Luke Rockhold, these guys deserve to go. They don't take into consideration these guys are fighting at the most elite level that is so hard to maintain.
You know what? And Eddie, I agree so much there, brother, because like let's go back to the Zuffa era when the Fertittas owned it.
Yes.
And you saw, you know, we didn't see that as much that we see right now. And I'm not sure exactly what they did differently because Dana was still there. So like, I'm not sure what to say about it, but like, Justin is so hitting the nail on the head. Like, when you are cutting a guy like Yoel Romero, when, you know what, back in the day, maybe he would be cut because, again, I get it on paper, but Yoel's one of those guys you can't put on paper. You can't say, well, he's 44 and, you know, he's 1-4 in his last 5. You can't do that because he still is fighting the very best, just like you said. And not only that, but he is a huge draw. Yeah. It's insane to me as a business decision because for me, you know, as a casual fan, he's one of those guys that I can actually name, right? And that's not a knock, but it's because he's had so many fights, right? So he's in there, he's implanted in my brain. And now when they remove him, like I get confused because back in the day, I feel like, you know, Dana and the Fertittas would have sat down and said, listen, you know, he's still drawing, he still has incredible knockout power. Instead of cutting him, why don't we use him properly and give him like 2 or 3 really exciting, you know, slug 'em fights? Like, let's find, you know, who knows? But like, let's match him
fight
up.
Was amazing. So the thing that people say is like, how are you going to keep Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series? I want to know from you as a manager to keep something like Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series where they're signing, you know, 2 to 4 guys every Tuesday, but yet you're going to cut somebody like Yoel Romero. What would you do if you were in either Dana's position or Yoel's manager? How would you go about holding that contract, or is it a better thing for Yoel to leave?
Well, you know what? I always try to paint the silver lining sort of thing as a manager in the region. You do. So I think if I was Yoel's manager, what I would be saying, or Yoel, sorry, I'm Canadian, eh? Hey. But if I was his manager, what I would be saying right now is this is not a bad thing because thanks to Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr. and Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz last year when they did or maybe it was 2 years ago when they did the Golden Boy fights with the Oscar De La Hoya, thanks to those 4 guys, it is undeniable that there is huge interest in seeing these legends still fight. Now, that doesn't mean we want to see some, you know, 23-year-old ace of spades come in and chew up our heroes, but we want to see them fight someone else who's a hero to us from that era. And, you know, I just think that if I was Yoel's manager, what I would be saying is, listen, man, this is a blessing in disguise because now we can get in touch with Tyson's legacy boxing, and we can say, hey guys, guess what? I'm free to come and knock somebody out on your undercard. Because, you know what I mean? Like that right there, I think like he would make a tidy purse. Like he would probably stand to make more money if he were to be able to make a transition like that. And I hear BKFC is sniffing around. I know they got some substantial weight. I mean, they paid Paul and Malignaggi like $1 million or some shit like that, right?
To fight Artem. Yeah.
Yeah, to fight the GOAT.
The GOAT, yes.
The GOAT.
Exactly.
Yeah, man. You know what? I love it, and I still, at the same time, you know, I love it just because it opens prospects for Yoel. Now, I've read already that PFL and Bellator have looked the other way on him, which is a little confusing to me. But again, it's probably a case of, I bet you again, this is just like a sort of like a guess, but if I was guessing, the reason why those 2 promotions maybe look the other way is he's maybe looking for an extended deal. Do you know what I mean? Like maybe he wants... Explain
to our listeners what that means, in case they're new to mixed martial arts.
Yeah, totally. So what I mean by an extended deal is a guy that's 44 years old. Understand here and now as a business decision. When you put somebody on a card that is over 40 years old, in most states, not all, but most states, the promotion actually has to pay a surplus to the insurance company because it's, I guess, added risk. I guess it's more expensive to the insurance company. So, and that was really surprising to me. I learned that in the last few years. But, yeah, so that was kind of an eye-opening thing. So when I see that he's 44 years old, if I was Scott Coker or if I was Ray Sifo, I think he's the one that's PFO?
Yeah,
but anyways,
Ray Sifo. I've interviewed him before, another legend.
Dude, he's so cool.
Yeah, he is. Nice.
But if I was either one of those guys and Romero's manager came to me and said, okay, we want a 3 or... Geez, that's, let's say a 3 or a 5 fight deal, because they want security. It's job security to these guys. It's no different than you or I. It's no fun finding out, okay, I'm good for the next 4 days for work, but then what am I going to do?
Exactly.
Same thing for a fighter, right? So they're sitting there going, you still got gas in the tank. You still look incredible. Now that you've dropped out of fighting the top 8 guys every single time, there's no reason he's not going to be a promotions champion as far as I'm concerned. I think he likely will be in wherever he ends up.
Yeah.
But again, it's a case of doing it right, and it's a case of utilizing the time properly, because at 44 years old, as a business decision, if the camp comes to me and says, we would like a 5-fight contract, if you do the math on that and you say, okay, let's say we can have you fight best case scenario once every 4 or 5 months. And so now we're talking a 2.25 or 2.5 year deal. You're almost 47 years old at the end of our contract now.
Yeah.
Right?
Even though he doesn't look it. He's like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if you ever seen the movie The Benchwarmers, but in The Benchwarmers, there's a guy.
DVD. I know that dates me, but I have it on DVD.
Yes. So there's like a scene in that movie where one of the opposing teams, I think it's that movie, brings in like this 55-year-old Cuban guy who claims he has got a birth certificate that says he's like 14, 15 years old. He's out there like drinking beer and striking kids out.
I remember.
That's yo out.
Yeah. Right? He like smokes and drinks in the middle of the field.
He gets all hammered. Yeah, that's your out right there.
That's such
He's
a
got
good
the birth
movie,
certificate, right?
You know what? And so honestly, again, like, as much as it pains me as a fan, as a business, like a person who has a little inside knowledge to it, I do understand that aspect. Now, that's where the ball shifts back to his manager and agent, and they need to think clearly, which is, okay, 44 years old, huge name right now, huge draw right now. If we had, let's say, a 2-fight deal with a promotion where our first fight is against one of your top 10 guys, if we win that fight, UL goes on to fight a contender fight. If he wins that fight, then we go from there and sign a new contract kind of thing. Now, why that would be smart for Romero to do is because now the pressure is off the promoters. They're going, okay, well, that's a commitment of, let's say, 8 to 10 months. We can shoulder that. We're pretty sure you'll still be in good shape for that amount of time. And why it's also smart for Romero is because then, now he's already got obviously buying power when he's asking. Like, he can ask for a pretty substantial purse, right?
Of course.
But if he did that 2-fight contract and he came back and now he's the #1 contender and now he doesn't have a contract and gets to renegotiate, now he's talking championship dollars for his contract.
Well, let's compare him to...
Do you know what I mean?
Let's compare somebody like Yoel to Rumble, who just signed to Bellator today. I believe it was like a year or 2 years that Rumble left the UFC, and he left in a very weird way. There is a conspiracy that I will be talking about on my next podcast, where I'll be covering MMA conspiracies about how Rumble retired, how he lost in that championship fight to DC, if I remember correctly, and his corner actually walked off. That's a conspiracy we can talk about. But he took about 2 years away. If you remember, he'd started doing bodybuilding, lifting, and started getting into, I believe, CBD weed or marijuana, and now he signed with Bellator. I don't think, and obviously it's, you know, you don't even have to think. If you're Yoel Romero and you're at that age, you can't do something like that. You know, what does it do to a fighter at that age to leave the UFC? You're never coming back. Will you ever make the same amount of money?
Well, you know what? The interesting thing about a lot of the guys that I have worked with is they are guys that are in the twilights of their career. So, you know, a lot of the times what happens to fighters when they hit about 34 or 35 years old, and these are even the world-class guys, some of their, you know, physical abilities start to decline ever so subtly. And because of that, and because of the fact that maybe they go on a couple of fight-losing streak, they get left behind by the big management firms. Now, when that happens, that is when I come into the picture, because a lot of the times, understandably so, because any one of us would feel the same way, when rejected that way, and when the people that are supposed to protect you and have their best interests at heart, whom you've worked with for a number of years and paid X number of dollars to, and so on and so forth, kind of turn their back on you. And I'll use a quote, but I won't say the fighter's name.
Okay.
I remember when I linked up with a UFC veteran, and he, at the time, I just got signed on as his agent. Really, it wasn't manager yet, but I had been working, like, getting his sponsorship and, like, seminars and, you know, like, booking appearances, just stuff like that, sort of the side stuff. And what ended up coming about is, after about a year of that, I had the fighter come to me and say, you know what, listen, I got one fight left on this contract that they have negotiated for me. After it's done, I don't want to work with them anymore. I want to work with you. You know, 3 or 4 years ago, I could text or call these guys and I would get an answer right away. But now it's 3 days, it's 4 days, it's 5 days, it's no answer at all, because they're not looked at as priorities anymore, which is something that I think, like, almost followed over from boxing or something, right? Yeah. But for me, as a person who was a fighter before I became an agent and a manager, like, the slogan for my company is fighting for the fighters, right? Because I got burned. I got left behind. I had promoters no pay me. I had all these crazy experiences happen to me back during my run that wizened me up to the game, right? And so basically, going back to the story there, they sort of handed in their resignation with that big company, and then we worked together for about 4 years or so, until actually it got to a point where the fighter and I said that I felt that fighter should consider retirement.
Ooh. That has to be so hard for somebody to say to anybody.
It's hard. It's hard, and I did it tactfully, Eddie. Like, I had, like, it was a 3-way thing. It was it was a really bad loss. Like, he got really hurt, and, like, we had a run of bad luck for a while, and I presented it to him as, like, I have this other gig, which is essentially, I had found him a coaching job full time, right?
Oh wow, yeah.
And
job security.
Like, 'cause this is, well, you never leave them behind, right? Like, especially when you work with a person for that long. Like, even to this day, like, I mean, you know, Gillard and I, we don't officially really work together anymore. I mean, geez, what a world we're in 2020. Who works for who? You know what I mean? Yeah. So there's so little going on. But, you know, when these guys still have fights coming up and I see it, first thing I do is I message them and wish them well and glad to see you got one coming and so on and so forth, because, you know, there's too much negativity in the world as it stands, right? We all to quote Bill S. Preston, Esquire, and Ted Theodore Logan, be excellent to each other, right? And
Sandy missed.
Yeah, that's what
yeah.
So that's what it comes down to. But, like, you know, so back to the retirement talk, which was the one and only time I've had this. But Eddie, to my defense, why I felt I had to do this was because he had got really hurt, brother, and he had been hurt a couple times, and it was, you know, it was one thing to be losing by submission. It was one thing to be losing decisions. It was another thing when you start getting put cold out, right? Because that's when lifelong problems can happen. And so, you know, we had the chat. It was very respectful. I said, you know, here's this other side gig. Here's the coaching job. What are your thoughts? And the thoughts were not of the same mind.
Of course.
And I tried, and I understood. I understood, but at the same time,
you're looking out.
Yeah, man. Like the guy who gave me my start in this industry, well, there was a couple guys who did, but the first guy who really face-to-face brought me on was like, yeah, kid, I'll give you a chance, was UFC legend Gary Goodridge.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And so when I linked up with Gary.
Perfect example, too.
That's exactly it, right? When I linked up with Gary, I saw, you know, fast forward 5 years, and I saw this beginning to happen to my fighter. And I'm like,
Alex, I've interviewed him. It was one of the interviews that will stand out to me forever. He shared a very personal story where he almost cried in the middle of our interview. I was sitting in as a co-host for Cage-Side Submissions. This is about 5 years ago now, going back. Right. And he was saying, you know, one day I was on a plane traveling. I had a grand mal seizure where, you know, I peed and you know, shit myself. And it was so embarrassing. And he broke down crying. And it was one of the saddest things. Man. And you don't want to see that happen to a legend like Gary.
Yeah, he's absolute pioneer, absolute legend.
And you know what?
You know what? He did it all for his family, guys. He did it all for his family. He did it all for us as fans. But let me tell you something. Knowing Gary personally, he did it for his two girls.
To battling depression for people out there that are going through stuff like that face depression every day. And Alex, I've had long talks with you, man, about the depression I've gone through just this year, you know, and then you look at somebody like Gary Goodridge, and then I reflect on myself, like, I don't have it as hard as somebody like that. And for somebody like Gary, who's reached out to me multiple times, you know, it means so much, man, when somebody can reach out that doesn't make you feel alone. And for you as a manager to see somebody like that, to prevent somebody to have to go through something like that. I don't think our listeners out there, and I hope they do, and I know a lot of them really do understand, but it's serious, man. It's not just somebody you're watching on the TV. These are people that have family, loved ones, and people that are actually going out there and fighting to show others you are not alone. And for you to sit there and try to say that, I know how hard that is for you to tell somebody that not only is somebody on contact with you that has become your friend, your mentor, somebody that you can even say gave you your shot. It gets real, man. It's not just about fighting. It's real.
Yeah, it's very real. And I mean, I've seen him do some pretty incredible stuff in the time that we worked together. I mean, from working up here in Canada, we have Bell Media. It's kind of like one of the big internet phone providers. And, you know, he does Bell Let's Talk, which is a hashtag that is used on social media that is basically not just for men, but for anybody who just feels alone. And so you do this Let's Talk, and that's sort of the movement that reminds us that, you know, in our times of darkness, that we aren't alone. You know what I mean? And I mean, to Gary again, I'll never, ever be able to thank him enough, because it's such a beautiful story. Because when I fought, so Gary lives an hour away from me. This is why I was very fortunate. I got lucky that way. Right. So, but where I really thank him is when I fought, now he wasn't my head coach by any means, but I trained with Gary a little bit. And so that was back, you know, 2010, 2011, 2012. I didn't start my business till 2015. So when I made it official and I was able to come back and, you know, I have this official company and, you know, I'm building this client list, and, you know, here's Drew McFedries from the UFC, who was an absolute human highlight reel at the time for killing people with knockouts. To any of the newer generation listeners, check out Drew McFedry highlight reel. Drew was the original Robbie Lawler. Drew was actually Robbie Lawler's teammate, so a bigger version of him, though.
Hell yeah.
And he was one of my originals. And another guy who believed in me was James McSweeney, and he helped me get my foot in the door with a couple people.
I never knew that.
Yeah, well, and he may not even remember it, but it was so important to me that I'll never forget it. And he just basically, when I was contacting some of these different fighters offering my services and rates and so forth, James basically said, you know, he's a good guy. And so that, like, most of them probably never would have got back to me without that referral. You know what I mean? I'm a realist. And that would be like going again back to like 2014 like, kind of thing.
Oh my God.
Yeah, man, it's such a small world in the fight community. But excuse me.
Blew my mind right there,
Alex. Gary. And then, of course, fast forward, and I start this company. So the first thing I did, because as far as I'm concerned, where there's a will, there's a way. And these guys have created legacies that there's no reason. Yes, they can't fight anymore, but there's no reason they can't cash into the name they've built for themselves, right?
Of course.
So for me, it became, you know, the first thing I wanted to do was reach out to Gary, because I knew he didn't have help at that point. I knew managers had, you know, had him basically smashed into pieces. You know, I mean, they had him fighting a killer like Paul Buentello when Gary was like, I don't know, 41 years old, and Paul was at his peak at that point. A lot of guys don't know who Paul Buentello was, but he used to be a top 5 contender in the UFC. He may have even fought for the title against Tim Sylvia at one point. But yeah, like they just kind of left Gary high and dry, man. And so the first thing that I did was reach out to him and just say, hey, listen, you know, if I'm still a fan of you, you still got fans.
Do you think the UFC has, like, it should be their priority for the legends that they've built up, the legends that they've made money off of? You know, you brought up Tim Sylvia recently, and this, you know, when I set up interviews, I'm going off of just conversation, and this is perfect. You just brought up Tim Sylvia, who's going back to the UFC and being like, listen, I have this injury on my arm from when I broke my arm, and if you guys remember that fight, he didn't even react to it. You know, like he pretended like it didn't happen. And I believe
that was the Frank Mir fight.
Yeah, I believe his manager at the time was what the hell is his name? Oh shit, I can remember off the top of my mind. But you know, he right now, years later, you know, he's looking for the UFC to cover him doing surgeries and stuff like that. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like it's the UFC's duty to, you know, not only cover for that payment because he did get it during his fights in the UFC, or do you feel like, you know, after the UFC, best of luck to you? How does that make you feel?
Well, I would like to see for both, well, not both, I should say all, for all professional combat sports. So let's talk boxing, professional kickboxing, pro Muay Thai, MMA, all of these guys and girls that fight. I would like to see a combat sports fighter association exist that protects these guys, that they pay into, that's almost kind of a little bit like a union to a certain degree, like because that's what exists in the NHL. That's what exists in the NBA. They have associations that after you're done, or if you're injured or whatever, you're taken care of.
Yeah.
Right? And that should be the case, because there was a time that the UFC was kind of trying to do that. They had given Chuck Liddell an executive job and Matt Hughes an executive job. But listen here, Eddie, they fired them like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, or whatever it was. So they obviously, you know, as sad as it is to say. And
those are some of the biggest names in the UFC.
And Sean don't blacklist me for this. Those are the matchmakers. But, you know, it seemed as though Dana kind of isn't interested in helping the past generations of fighters out, and that's sad, because, you know, Tim Sylvia is a former 2, if not 3-time UFC heavyweight champion. I mean, he kept that heavyweight, him and Frank Mir kept the heavyweight division going after they lost the guys like Tank Abbott and Mark Kerr, and all those guys got too old. Gary got, you know, everybody left and went over to Pride and shit. And so, like, they kept that going, and it really does eke me, if I'm being honest a little bit, that it's just like, you know, why isn't more being done? Like, why when these fighters hit, you know, 35 or 40 or, you know, whatever the magic number is, or 45 or 50, why is it that they just cease to be human beings? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. And like the problem is that a lot of them, like, especially down your side of the border, Gary's very fortunate that he's Canadian, so his healthcare is covered, right? And so I understand that it's a little bit of a different ball game, but I have seen an alarming number of guys that I call friends that I've known in the industry for a long time. And again, out of respect, I don't say names, but I've seen an alarming number, Eddie, of guys, fighters going on that fought in that era and fought in the same era that I fought in. And they're complaining about headaches and depression. And I'm like, every single time I see it, the first thing I do is I contact them and I say, get in touch with Gary, because Gary is just 5 steps ahead of where I feel you could be going potentially. It's not like I'm not a doctor, right? But when I see someone list 3 or 4 of the symptoms and someone that I've worked with, I'm just like, you know what, just in case, maybe you should chat, because maybe you need to explore this a little bit farther.
CTE. We've learned so much about just CTE. You know, I get really upset when I see comments on Brandon Schaub or Tito Ortiz. I mean, I will laugh at some of the things, little clips, because I know that the fight, everyone's kind of aware of it, but it's very serious when you're bullying somebody that you've also praised in the past. Like Brandon Schaub, we loved him on The Ultimate Fighter with James and Kimbo. Tito Ortiz, man, that's a legend that we've sat there and we've rooted for. And now we look at all the repercussions that the entertainment industry has caused them. And we're going to sit there now and we're going to laugh and, really humiliate and make them feel like they have no part because of the injuries that have that has been caused over the years. And then you look at, the UFC not backing them up. It's awful, man. It's very sad to see.
It hurts me, man. It really does hurt me. I mean, one that you were mentioning, Tito, the other one that really, really gets me is like, people are so freaking hard on Chuck Liddell these days. It's like, we all get it. He has a bit of a speech slur now. Leave the guy alone. You know what I mean? Like, why has he got to be turned into a meme, and why has it got to be a GIF, and why has it got to be brought up every time he does an interview? Like, you think he doesn't know it? Like, I myself am a competitive bodybuilder, and like with that, there's always hate that comes on social media. But when someone points out a flaw to me, I'm always like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, you think that if you're able to see a flaw in my body that I'm not able to see a flaw in my body? Like, you don't think I know that, you know what I mean? Like, why do you feel the need to point that out? But it's sad to say, it's the world we're living in these days. But you know what? It's not 100% the case. There are still dudes out there like you and like me, and like Jake, our good buddy out in California right now, who's battling his pancreas ailment. Like, people with good hearts, man. Like, for any of the listeners who may remember, some time ago, actually, it probably would be like, what would you say, Eddie? 6-7 months ago when he was on. But Jake, something like that. So Jake, the vocalist,
Alex, I think it was even longer ago. I think it was maybe about 14 months ago. I could be completely wrong.
Yeah, probably, man. COVID messed my internal, my schedule up in my brain. But you're absolutely right. It probably would be
one of my favorite interviews, though.
Well, and he's such an incredible guy, like this talented musician. He's a frontman for Defiler, Diva Nation, Painless. I mean, it just goes on. And he's battling a really, really serious ailment. And actually what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to send a little info blog thing that has some information about it, and just information to sort of a GoFundMe to help him with his medication and stuff, because he's a really young cat, huge fight fan. In fact, Rudo Tovar, a client of mine, he's a former WBC lightweight champion, currently fights with Lion Fights and BKFC.
Big Muay Thai promotion.
Huge. In fact, Rudo's the guy that fought Casera back in August of 2019. Casera's now their champion, so it was it was a title eliminator, and we lost, I want to say it was split decision to him. But anyway, so for that fight, though, we used Walk in the Glow, which is one of Jake's songs, and it just was an incredibly well-received fight song. For any fighters out there looking for a heavy metal song to come out to, just type in Defiler. I dare you. See what happens. I guarantee you're going to use it.
What is it, Walk in the Glow?
Yeah, it's called Walk in the Glow, man. It's such a phenomenal entrance. We used it in Vegas. It was the place to use it.
Hold on one second. Oh, didn't mean for that to happen. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to repost our interview with Jake And if
you should, yeah, man, because that'll help bring awareness. Just, you know, that was obviously when he still had the energy to do it. I mean, Jake and I still speak when he's got energy. And he brought up his father. He lost his father to cancer, and he spoke about, you know, he was in jail. One of my favorite parts of the interview. Yeah. He was in jail when he found out that he got signed by Jamie Josta. Jamie Josta grew up a block from me. Not only here in New Haven, but his parents had a house on Neck Road, you know, in Madison, Connecticut. Crazy. Like right down the road from my best friends that, you know, it's such a small world. Jamie Josta, a legend of mine. That is small. And actually, you know what, to Jake's losses, he did lose his father, and then actually very recently he lost his best friend, one of his best friends, and the drummer from Diva Nation. He actually, Craig, his last name's slipping my mind. That's terrible of me. But Craig just passed away maybe a month ago or so. So on top of Jake's failing pancreas in his mid-20s, he's dealing with all that. It's like, it's such a heavy situation.
Here's what bothers me, Alex, though. We can listen to this. I can listen to you say this. Our listeners can, you know, hear, and they can feel pity in the heart. But do a lot of us realize that this could happen to anybody? This isn't just a podcast. When you see things on reality shows like Intervention, you sit there and you think, oh, this can't happen to me. It happens to us all. Absolutely. It can happen to anybody.
And no one's above it. Whether you're a fighter that's fought in front of 50,000+ fans live, whether you're someone who has toured literally across the world and has videos that have, I shit you guys not, nearly 4 million views individually, you know, which is where Defiler's at. They're a very big metal band, to people that aren't aware. No one is untouchable. And I think if we could, you know, really get a message across with this podcast, I think Eddie and I would agree that, you know, kind of be good to each other and just don't plan ahead necessarily. Just enjoy the day. Like, that doesn't mean disregard the future, but
how do you start your day, Alex? Man. Like, you know, me and you have had some very, very in-depth talk, like closer talks than I've had with you than I've had with a lot of my close friends at this point in my life. Because, you know, I open up to you a lot. You open up to me a lot. The interviews I've had have opened up a lot of conversations that we wouldn't hear in other podcasts, where I can get people to open up. Like, this is pure MMA. I want people to be pure. What do you do when you wake up in the morning for your mental health to start your day? Because a lot of us wake up when we're caught in the grind of things, and we do look forward to, you know, MMA fights coming up, but what keeps you sane? You know, you have a lot of responsibilities. You have a family, you have a job, you have a lot of fighters on your back that are looking to make money. That, you know, it's a huge responsibility. What do you do personally to keep your mental sanity in the morning? How do you start your day, or how do you keep your sanity? How do you go about it? What's the best way you do that some of my listeners can, and even myself, take into account to make our days a little bit better? Some practices.
For me, guys and girls, I would say it all comes down to small, achievable goals that lead to a grander goal. So the grander goal is the overall thing. So this is kind of like a two-part question, so I'll give you a two-part answer.
Of course.
I would say that, again, the goal setting is absolutely imperative, because complacency is next to death. Now, that's a saying from bodybuilding, but I hold it close to my heart. And that doesn't mean that being content and loving yourself is a bad thing. That's what we all want to achieve in our life. Obviously, that's like winning the gold medal at life right there. Yeah. But for those of us still striving for it, you know what I mean, kind of thing, that I think it's a true statement. And then, so where the small goals come into play with that grand goal is that sometimes these grand goals that we set for ourselves, it could be a 90-day thing, it could be a 5-year plan, it could be a 2-year plan. We really don't know what that goal is and the time that's going to take into it. So that can affect our mentality in a big way, where, like, let's say it's something where it's going to take 4 months, and 60 days in, you're like, geez, I really don't feel like I'm accomplishing anything. And, you know, the goal is still so far away. That's where those small goals come into play. So for me, when I left mixed martial arts, I really had a hard time with myself, as I suspect all fighters do when they leave it behind. Because I had a fight where medically I just wasn't able to continue anymore afterwards. Wow. I had an 11-day brain bleed.
Wow.
And so they revoked my license and said no more no more sanctioned fighting, at least. So I was like, okay, this is what I've spent the last 4 or 5 years of my life, and then 5 years previous without even knowing it, because I was a collegiate wrestler.
Well, I don't mean to sidetrack, but that's another thing, fans and people out there need to take in consideration when you're making fun of these people. They've risked their relationships. They've risked, making a secure job, and you end up, with brain.
I can't even go into it. That would be like, we would have to pull out, the listeners would nod off. There's so many sacrifices and stuff that have been made. So many. But it's all for the greater good, and I don't regret, or I try not to regret anything, because the goal for me is to make it to the finish line with as few regrets as physically possible.
Paying it forward, yeah.
Right. So if I could give some advice to the listeners, it would just be that set your big goal, but then set smaller goals. So like when I left mixed martial arts and I found myself literally lost. I'm like, what? Like, am I just, do I work in a factory now? Do I go back to school at 25? What do I do? I was just getting going and things were just getting good. And now here I am reassessing the situation very, very hard. Yeah. At that time, my son was 3. So it was like, what the hell am I going to do? And so I just, checked myself and did the work thing and hustled and grinded and kept my nose down, if you will, for a couple of years. But I kept in the gym and I kept training, not as much in mixed martial arts. That got less and less and less as time progressed away. I was actually kind of almost doing strictly boxing eventually.
But you always kept active, right?
Pardon me?
Like, have you ever been through a situation, I know you have, where you can't even get yourself motivated to go to a boxing class? Like, you were just saying, like, you were reevaluating your life. Recently, all my listeners know that I've been having a really hard time battling depression. This is what I love, doing this podcast, having these real conversations. This is why it's Pure Evil MMA. These are real talks. You know what I mean? This is not just about MMA. This is about therapy. This is about the full circle of it. Not just the entertainment aspect, but the full circle of it. Well, there's a lot of fighters like Yoel, when he got kicked off, you have this one turning you down, this one turning you down, and it's got to be like, what did I do with my life? How do you have you ever been in a position where like you can't even get motivated to go to a boxing class? And how did you find yourself to regain that motivation?
Well, you know what? I think I would have to be a bold-faced liar to say I haven't had a roller coasters, or there's been chunks of time, be it a couple weeks, be it a month, whatever, where things just go not great, right? And it just seems to build and build and build. But I think one thing that's always kind of glued in the back of my mind is, just like nothing gold can last, nothing gray can last. So at the same time, it's like, while it's bad, it's going to get better. Yeah. Right? Like, there's always a balance to life, and you got to kind of try to believe that a little bit. For me, when I run into, and you know what? I'm actually dealing with this very situation right now because just like here in Canada, we have lockdowns going on and everything's like that. So I had been preparing for a bodybuilding show. I compete with the IDFA, which is the International Drug-Free Association of Bodybuilders. Hell yeah. And I was actually leading to that. It was really my saving grace, Eddie, when I left mixed martial arts and I really didn't know what to do with myself. I found a sport, if you could call it that, a subjective sport is what we'll call it. But I found something to keep me motivated that I still enjoyed, and I was still able to do a lot of the things and a lot of the lifts and the training and the conditioning that I had done in mixed martial arts for years and years and years. But now I was able to repurpose it, and I started shifting my attention to building my body up a little bit, because I fought at 155, so I was just a skinny little bastard. I walked around at like 165, 168, 170 was the biggest I ever was before I had to do a cut. But I started to build my body up, and I was like, you know what, for the first time I can kind of just eat off the chain, and I can just lift, and I can I don't have to have the anxiety in my mind of okay, now I have to cut weight and I have to watch this and I have to do that. It's like I can just live and just kind of, you know, make some money working a normal job and just build my body up. And over the period of like 4 years or so, maybe closer to 5, I went from that 168, 170 up to about 205 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And I maintained the same level of leanness because as a lightweight, I was pretty lean, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm 5'10" and a bit, so I wasn't a short lightweight by any means. But I had maintained that level of leanness that I had as a fighter, but now I was 50 pounds or, 40, 45 pounds bigger over the course of that 5 years. And so in 2018, when I turned 30, I had a big, oh, geez, I'm getting old moment and decided.
We all do when we turn 30, you know?
Well, you know what? It is just like, it was a weird little thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You leave your 20s behind, it's like, oh, wow, this is so
it's
weird.
Crossroads,
like, can I go on a date with a chick who's in her 20s now? Like, I'm sir in the line, you know what I mean? Like,
well, here's the thing, Alex, when you get to that point where you're like, oh, shit, I'm 30 now. It's like, when we're like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, we're like, when we picture 30 years old, we're like, I want to be a parent, I want to have a house, I want to have a secure job, and we reflect on that. Times are different now.
That's it, man.
Exactly.
Yeah, so for me, it was like I had a big case of that because I was like, here I am, I'm renting, and like I did have a girlfriend at the time. I did. She was I had been with her for 7 or 8 months, but again, it was just like one of those things, and so I'm like, you know what? To hell with it. I'm gonna throw my name in the hat for a bodybuilding show. My first show was actually physique. So there's a difference there. Physique, for listeners, is the dudes that you see go up and they wear the board shorts and they're a much more downsized version of bodybuilders. Like, it's much more attainable. And so I did that for my first show, and I really enjoyed the experience, actually. Like, it was funny though, because I can say, doing my first show, and that was really my first event that I had been to since I was a fighter, I still had this funny mindset of a mixed martial artist. So there I am in the back, like, of the Mr. Universe, the Natural Mr. Universe contest. And I have, like, tons of people around me getting spray tans going on, and like they're pumping up, doing push-ups and stuff like that. And like, what do? I walk into the corner, and this was my routine when I was a fighter. I used to pick my corner of the room, go over to the corner, I'd throw my gym bag into the corner, I'd basically claim my spot, right? And then I'd throw my headphones on, I'd face the fucking wall, because the mental game in fighting is so crazy that, like, let's say hour before you actually fight, especially like 1 or 2 fights before yours, your mind just starts doing really weird things to you. So like, I would face the wall. And to any fighters that have problems with anxiety out there, this is something for you to try if you haven't tried this yet. When you feel that anxiety coming on, deep breaths obviously help, but face the wall as soon as you go into that locker room. No other fighter matters in there. It doesn't matter if you're in the blue locker room and the main event fighter is in there, the number 1 contender, yada, yada, yada. Shake his hand, shake her hand after the event. Up until you fight, you are completely focused. And so, I would face the wall. I'd throw my headphones in. I'd do my shadow boxing. When it came time for me to hit the mitts, I'd turn around, hit the mitts, and then I'd turn back and I'd face the wall and keep going. It kept things clear for me. And so I did the same thing at this Natural Mr. Universe. These physique and bodybuilder people probably thought I was fucking off my meds. Like, I'm not going to lie, because they're probably like, I can see it. They're all talking and like sharing how their prep went and stuff. And that's kind of a no-no in my world, right? So
yeah.
It's just like, I was so stuck in fight mode.
I can see it.
But by the end of it, like, I had been so made aware that this is not the same game. So when I was side stage and I never thought I was going to get high enough to get a singles. So I didn't actually make a singles routine.
What's that mean?
So that's where you get to go by yourself and not with everybody else.
Oh,
right?
Okay.
But I had actually done well enough to get that. So surprise to me, they're like, we're going to do this alphabetically. Well, my name is Alex Bonwick, AB. Ooh. So I'm like, oh shit, I'm not going to get to watch even anybody go before I hit stage. I'm like, I don't know really what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm literally like, I don't know where I'm supposed to stand or where I'm supposed to walk or where I'm supposed to look. I'm like, I have no idea. So I hear my fellow competitors that I was competing against kind of muttering between each other about, well, they're going to hit this here and they're doing their T-walk this way. And I like turn and I'm like, whoa, what the hell's a T-walk?
Yeah.
And the guy like does exactly that. He laughs at me. He's like, dude, you know what a T-walk is? I'm like, you're going to have to enlighten me.
That's great.
And so he was nice enough to do it. And fortunately for me, he did. And then I go out there and I'm like, oh shit, I don't have a routine planned in my mind. I'm in front of like 1,000 people at the Universe. And I'm like on stage. I'm like, okay, this is great. Oh, and before I got to pose, I forgot they false started me twice.
What does that mean?
So I'm standing side stage, and as they announce your name and your number, you're supposed to kind of hit the stage and, you know, hit your like little pose thing.
Yeah.
And so they start announcing my name and they say Alex. And so I start walking out. And the promoter, Sean Campbell is his name, real great guy. He turns to me and he goes, whoa, Alex, get back. I'm like, oh shit. So I'm halfway out on the stage, so the fans can see me.
I feel your anxiety here.
The MC's awkwardly staring at me like I'm just like, I felt like I was in like a Looney Tunes
so out of place,
or something like that,
right?
And pardon me.
Like you're so out of place, like you're like shit.
Oh yeah, dude, like red sore thumb, and so I'm like just automatically, and I don't know why I did this, but I'm like, okay, let's turn a bad into a good. And I just like put my finger up in the air saying like 1 second. And then I turn around and walk back to the side stage. So that got everybody laughing in the audience, right?
Hell yeah.
And yeah, so they start saying my name, and the promoter says to me, he's like, okay, when they finish your name, that's when you go out. I'm like, okay, I got it now. And so I waited for them to finish my last name, and I go out. And I think this was more the lighting timing being off, but they called me back again. So I'm like, oh, come on. Right? I'm like, well, you guys are like sabotaging my damn routine here. And so I actually fake white boy moonwalked off the stage. Oh, man. Everybody started killing themselves laughing. I went out. I did my poses on the third try. And, I medaled, which was more than I ever thought.
Really?
Yeah, and I say, you know what, guys, to anybody thinking about, even because maybe some of the casual listeners might be gym addicts and everything like that. The thing that made me medal more, I would say, than knowing how to pose and stuff, because let's be honest, I was greener than baby shit. God. Was having that confidence shine through. So even though I was being false started, don't take yourself so seriously, right? So it's just like, whatever. I honestly believe, and I'm happy to take it, but I think I left that show with the reputation of like the Chris Farley of like the IDFA.
Oh gosh. Trying out for the Chippendales.
Just like, willing to like self-deprecate and like willing to just like make an ass of himself where everybody's so serious. But for me being a fighter, I was like, how are you guys nervous and taking this so serious right now? Nobody's out there trying to knock your ass out. I'm like, you want to know anxious? I'm like, have your younger brother in your corner and then have a thought come through your mind like, geez, I hope I don't get knocked out and shit in my trunks because I have had that thought. That is scarier than going on stage.
That happens. I had Dennis Holman tell me, he's cornered fighters where that's happened overseas, where he tries to prevent, when somebody gets knocked out, something like that happening. That's very embarrassing. And Alex, I love that you brought that up because a lot of people out there that are, they're green light. It almost reminds me of being in like Pee Wee baseball, where like you're nervous, you're trying something new, and then you get out there, your family's watching, people are watching, and you feel that anxiety, and you make one mistake, two mistakes, and then it's like spotlights on you. A lot of people would say, screw this, I want to go home and hide under my sheets. You, on the other hand, went out there and did it, and you even got a medal. That says a lot, Alex.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, and like that's the thing. Like, and interestingly enough, so I have a show. I'm competing this weekend in the Universe again. I moved up a class to bodybuilding this time, So full on Speedo, yeehaw!
Hell yeah! Is that weird?
But,
is that
gonna
weird
do
for
that?
you?
Gonna give it a go. And again, that for me, circling way back here, because you know us, we love to sidestep and side. Like we're MC Hammer, we sidestep. So
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
But like, that is really what saved me after my fight career ended.
Wow.
I needed something to set my sights on athletically,
But also something competitive, whether it's bodybuilding or even art. Like I've seen a lot of fighters like BJ Penn. They don't know what to do because their whole life has been fighting. And you dedicate your life and people write you off, even if you're still signed to the UFC. Look at Tony Ferguson right now. He's lost a couple fights and people are like, he's past his prime. It's awful. It's a crazy world to be in. So it's amazing that not only are you doing this, but you're also still learning as you do it, and you're also connected to fighters who are going through that same thing. I think that's absolutely amazing, and I think that what sets you apart from a lot of the other managers, Alex, is that you're still doing your own thing and facing the fear that a lot of managers out there will never face again, and you're putting yourself out there. That has to be a comfort for fighters that are signing with you, right?
Yeah, well, I think that is, but without giving away the trick of the trade, and now there'll be like first round management and shit going out and signing former fighters as managers. But yeah, no, it's really been advantageous to have that connection, to be able to sit down and, have a fighter feel your words and hear what you're saying and go, damn, I've had that happen to me. He's had that happen to him. And he's learned how to, sidestep it and take care of it so that that's not going to happen again, right? And, I got a couple of things I want to leave off with, like just, with everything being so dark and everything being so gray. By the way, it's December 13th that I'll be competing. I don't know if my boy Eddie's up for it, but if possible, I'll send the results and so forth. Who knows how your boy's going to do, but playing with the big boys again, stepping up. But I think I've set my sights really high. I'd really like to earn my pro card and earn myself a gold. I never won a title belt as a mixed martial artist. It was something that eluded me. And so for me, it's a little bit of finality, a little bit in my athletics career to earn some gold of some kind, if you will.
That Joe Riggs trophy room type shit, right?
Exactly. Well, shoot, he damn near needs a trophy house, bro. He almost needs a trophy house. No, I got a couple of medals and I got a couple of awards and a few lanyards, and like I've kept a lot of stuff. I'm a sentimental dude. Like I've got the wraps from my first fight. And
that's awesome.
It's all about the memories, right? But again, circling back to anybody who ever has self-doubt or questions their ability to achieve a dream, I want to go and just tell you guys a quick story about the first big event that Gary Goodridge took me to as his manager, which was so amazing. It was an event in Toronto, Ontario, and it was the anniversary. I can't say exactly which one because it's not coming to me right now, but it was the anniversary of Muhammad Ali fighting George Chuvalo, who was the Canadian heavyweight champion at that time, and a legend up here, obviously, Chuvalo. And so at the event, we had Layla Ali representing her at that time deceased father, right? Muhammad had passed.
Whoa. Is she the heavier set daughter of Ali?
Yeah, she was the boxing world champion that had like 400 world titles.
Okay. No, I watched 90 Days In, and one of his daughters was on 90 Days In. It's obviously the other daughter then. Okay,
yeah. I'm not sure how many kids I'm sure you probably had a handful of them back in the day, right?
We're actually looking at the Chuvalo fight right now on the video cast. For people who are listening to iTunes right now or Spotify, we're looking at the Chuvalo fight of Muhammad Ali.
So real quick, I love it that you're watching that right now because Muhammad Ali, after the fight, and I won't spoil it, but what he said about George was, and keep in mind the guys that Ali fought, he said George Chuvalo was the toughest man I ever fought. It just, Chuvalo was, as stereotypical Canadian as you could ever be. He had the hairy chest and just like, you know what I mean? Like just a big farm boy that went out there and never took a step back. But anyways, back to the story. So they were having a very special VIP party in Toronto where Layla was the guest of honor, and then George Chuvalo, who's still with us, was the guest of honor. And we had this massive screen set up in a VIP section of a lounge with a projection monitor where they had the fight that we were going to rewatch it, you know, with George, which was a very cool experience. And Lennox Lewis showed up, former world heavyweight champion. Daryl Sittler, who is an NHL legend from the Toronto Maple Leafs. There was a handful of just incredibly famous athletes that showed up to this man's you know, to commemorate basically Muhammad and George and what they had done. But why I'm telling you guys this is because I was sitting beside Gary, who was sitting beside George, I want to say. And I had a young fella come up to me who was maybe 13 or 14 years old. And he asked who I was, you know, because obviously if I'm on the front row in the luxury seats, they're like, you know, who are you? You got to be somebody. You're young. What are you doing here? And I just kind of chuckled, and like I was like, oh, I'm Big Daddy's manager. And the kid looked at me and kind of scrunched his face and was like, you're his manager? Because I'm like this, like, you know, slender, meek little white guy that's like, you know, at the time, like 20, maybe 26 or something like that. And, you know, Gary's sitting there, big 270 pound, just rip shit up still, good Gary Goodridge. And then he's like, you're his manager? I'm like, yeah. He's like, the kid goes, how old are you? And I go, 26. He's like, wow. And I just pulled a chair up to the front row, and he plunked his little butt down beside us.
Oh, wow.
And he watched a couple rounds with us. And the reason why I'm telling you guys this is because nothing's impossible. You know, the disbelief that kid showed when I said who I was and why I was there, it's the same disbelief I felt doing what I did. You know, I mean, I've been doing it now for going on 6 years. Wow. You know, I've been in the fight games for 10 years now. And I still catch myself going, you know, I got to pinch myself every once in a while. You know, when you're sitting there and, you know, some legendary names like a Sean Shirk reaches out to you, or a Pete Spratt, or if we go back even further generation, a Remco Pardue who fought Hoist Gracie back in the bare knuckle days. You know, like I've got so many of these friends that are such great guys out there that still, you know, a lot of them still compete, whether it's just in BJJ or judo and different things.
Alex, but, I've had the same experience, and you've given me those experiences as well throughout my career. I've interviewed people that I've looked up to, legends. Like Michelle Watterson, I used to have her photo pinned up in my bedroom in like 8th or 9th grade. And down the road, I have interviewed like Mayhem Miller. I have his telephone number in my phone.
Oh, it's so cool.
Like literally my idols. And I go and I've, you know, over the years, I've interviewed these people. And even James McSweeney, who I do a show with, like, looks up to these people, and it blows my mind. But the craziest part about it is the people around me don't understand how crazy that really is to somebody like me, and how much it really means, and how far it makes me feel like I've gotten. And when you talk to people with a closed mind like that don't know who A, B, and C is, they try to belittle it, and you try to be like, oh, well, maybe I don't deserve what I have, what I've worked for, the thousands and thousands of hours of work I've put into this. Maybe it's really not as special as I believe it is. But Alex, this podcast is based off, the reason why me and you did this podcast is to prove to our listeners that you can do it. There is no difference between you, me, Sean Shirk, Muhammad Ali. We all lay our head on a pillow at night. We all wake up tomorrow morning, and it's about how we focus ourselves, how we get our minds in the right state of mind, how we get our bodies to the best possible outcome throughout the day to make sure that we're proud of ourselves, to make a step forward. And everything that you've said during this interview, every single name that you've brought up, including yourself, including that story that you just shared of your first time being a greenhorn, going up on stage and having not one but 2 times where they called you back, and all the veterans sitting there, and you must feel like such an outcast. Well, listen, we all feel like outcasts all the time. We all talk to people that have never seen somebody make it. And you know what? For that position that you want, Alex, for that position that I want, you know, look like you looking at the Mount Kikawas, Ali Abdelaziz's, me looking up to Ariel Hawani's, Luke Thomas's.
Yeah.
Somebody is next in line. Why not you? Why not me?
That's it. That's it. I couldn't agree more, man. Like, listening to you just gave me chills. I got to be honest. I feel like I got to go. So I've got my show this weekend. Now I'm so motivated. I feel like I got to go do some push-ups or something after this interview.
And that's why we call this Pure Evil MMA, because this is some real talk, man. This isn't just about the excitement of the sport. This is about, and I just wrote an article, Alex, on pureevilmma.com about why we love mixed martial arts. It's not just because we like the bloodshed. It's because we look to these fighters and we see ourselves in those fighters. We know that they have troubles going on at home. You know, Louis Samoka having a child in the hospital about to die, going in there, cutting weight. You know, there's so many sacrifices we must make to better ourselves, to better our futures. And we all face that self-doubt. And you proved it, you know, in that story that you shared of, you know, walking out not once but twice. You proved that it's a state of mind. It's about
absolutely
being centered. And that's what Pure Evil MMA is about. And that's why I have you on. That's why you send these fighters like Sean Shirk, who's trying to motivate his son. That's why you send people to me like Melvin Gillard, who's faced so many times in his life where people are like, you're done, you're finished for, you're not thinking right. You know, Rumble Johnson, Yoel Romero, all these fighters that we've talked about that have that second step. It's never over until we say it's over. And until we say it's over, we can't listen to anybody else. We must make the best of ourselves. Alex, I want to thank you so much for joining me, man. We need to make a part 2 of this. And, you know, you have this competition coming up. Let's do that part 2 after the competition.
That sounds awesome to me. If I can give a real quick shout out just to a couple sponsors there. And it was something I wanted to say towards your sponsors, actually, when you were giving the rundown, is I think that's absolutely a phenomenal how they give back to the veterans.
Hero Soap Company.
You know, we talk about fighters not getting forgotten. And frankly, there's someone who is the exact same. Soldiers, Air Force, National Guard, Navy, they're all fighters. Coast Guard even, they're all fighters in real, like, next level sense of the word. Reality. And yeah, exactly. And I feel like when their military career is over, I think they feel like they're forgotten. And just like, I want, you know, anybody, the Marines, anybody who's listening to this that served, you know, we appreciate you. We think about you guys, and, you know that you're not the only ones that when it's done feel forgotten, and honestly know that you're not forgotten, just like us as fighters and as bodybuilders and as, quite frankly, as podcast hosts, as dreamers. You know, it's going to happen. And we just got to kind of remember that we're not alone, and that we're not forgotten, and that even if someone says, you know, belittles your dream, at the end of the day, Eddie, it's because they see something in you that they wish that they could have achieved, but never had the audacity. They never had the cojones or balls to actually do it.
Yes.
And so they lash out at us because we, while maybe not achieving it fully yet, are on the fucking highway, man. We're on the highway to achieving it.
And they want us to settle for that safety net, Alex. They want us to fall on that safety net just like they had to do.
Exactly, bro. We had the stones to look at that door and not know what's behind it, but turn the fucking handle anyways. And honestly, and I don't like, to anybody who is afraid of that proverbial door to turn the handle, I promise you that there's no harm that can come from the other side.
Yes.
You can step away. If you walk into that room that's on the other side of the door and you don't like it, if it's less comfortable than the room you just left, guess what? Be like me, moonwalk your ass back into the room that you just left and shut the fucking door and look around and see if there's another one. You know what I mean?
Alex, we only have one ticket in this life. We only have one ticket in this life. We have to, even though there's some of us out there that feel like misfits, that feel like we'll never fit in. You know, we have one ticket to make this life special, to make an impact, to make, you know, a chisel on the rock of life, to make our imprint, leave our imprint. And I think this interview covered all of that, between fighting, between real life, the full circle of it all. And that's why this is Pure Evil MMA. Alex, I want to thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on, brother. I appreciate that so much. Thanks to Boss Supplements, of course, one of my sponsors for a very long time. And thanks to the IDFA, obviously, for letting an old fogey like me compete.
Hell yeah. Alex, make sure to drop all those links. I'll share them in the bottom information section of this podcast. Available on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, Player FM, Megaphone. I want to give a shout out to our sponsors as well in association with the UFC, Manscaped. I also want to give a shout out to Top Affiliate, who you guys can place bets on. I'll have all that down below in the section for information. And last but not least, Hero Soap Company for the veterans, guys. I gotta go take a shower with my girlfriend right now. I gotta smell good. I gotta make sure my dad doesn't have the allergies to it either. Alex, thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon. I wish you best of luck at the competition, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, guys. Everybody take care of each other and be good to each other.
God bless.
God bless you.
There you guys go. That was a really amazing interview that we just did with Alex. I've been really close friends with him for a very long time. We've had very, very close conversations about some real life stuff, which I feel like we covered everything that we've really ever talked about. The motivation that Alex has given me through hard times. I've messaged him at 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. I've messaged him at midnight, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes, looking for advice where I feel lost, and I know that there's somebody out there that understands. Alex listens to every single episode of this show. Guys, I've been almost doing this for 6 years now. 6 years. 2020 has been a very hard year for me. You know, when I left Pro Wrestling Authority, there was a guy named Max who actually helped me come up with the name Pure Evil MMA. I didn't come up with it myself. It was my old boss, Max, who gave me my start as an MMA journalist before I even went to broadcasting school. And before I left the website to sign with MyMMAnews.com, who I'm no longer with anymore because I opened up PureEvilMMA.com. And MyMMAnews.com, top 5 website right now. So go check out MyMMAnews.com. But when I worked for Pro Wrestling Authority and moved over to MyMMAnews.com, my boss, Max, said to me, the reason I gave you the name Pure Evil MMA is because you sit here week after week and you give your pure reaction. You give your pure heart, soul, stomach, energy to your listeners of what you've experienced, what you've witnessed, and create the excitement around it. You don't beat around the bushes. You're not afraid of being denied credentials because of what you have to say, because there's 99% of the listeners out there, 99% of the MMA fans, wrestling fans, Muay Thai fans, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fans, Judo fans, that will agree with you because you're giving your 100% pure take on it. This isn't pure evil because I have nothing nice to say. This is pure Eddie Veleco. That's why it's called Pure Evil MMA. That's why I have it tattooed on my hands. E for Eddie. V-I-L for my last name. Evil. Pure Eddie Veleco MMA. And that interview right there sums it all up. And I hope that you guys can take something away from this podcast. It's a very hard year. It's, you know, I've seen so many messages from a lot of the listeners out there wondering where I've been, if I'm okay. between that and the emails that I've got from sponsors that are affiliated with the UFC, like Manscaped, reminds me that all the thousands and thousands of hours I've put in, the thousands of interviews I've had in the last 5-6 years. I've interviewed people like Valentina Shevchenko, Mayhem Miller, Sean Shirk, Melvin Gillard, two people that, Alex obviously manages. Legends, man. Legends. I wouldn't trade that for the world. And I can't forget how important this is to me. This podcast, you guys out there that are listening to this on your way to work right now, maybe you're on the beach right now, which I'm fucking jealous if you are. Listen to this on the train, wherever you are listening to this, watching it at home, in your living room, chilling. It means the world, guys. It really means the world. And every episode is dedicated to the people out there that are struggling, that go through work week after week, that have to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, go to work, get out at 3, and have something to look forward to. Because that's what life's about. Your boss is going to yell at you. You're going to step in dog shit. We can have the worst day ever. But at the end of it, at the end of the week, we know there's a fight coming up that we can be excited for. And we can connect with the community on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or Reddit or wherever you guys are on these podcasts and see what I'm thinking, Joe's thinking, Brandon's thinking, Adam Hunter's thinking. Shout out to MMA Roasted. I mean, we keep each other going. And there's a point where I almost, even this week, guys, even this week, where I get those moments where I feel like giving up. I feel like ending my life. I feel threatened. I feel I can't do this. But what do I tell you guys all the time? It's something I've never been told myself, but I tell you guys all the time, and I got to remind myself, practice what you preach, right? There's always somebody next in line for what you want to do. Whether you're a hairdresser and you want to be Paul Mitchell, silky smooth, like remember the Zohan. Whether you want to be the next Luke Thomas, Errol Helwani, whether you want to be the next Malky Cow, Ali Abdelaziz, the next Conor McGregor, never, ever let somebody tell you you can't do it. And the people who tell you that you can't do it are the people who've never seen anybody they know do it. And they look at people on the TV or even YouTube, and say, oh, that's cool, but I'll never be able to do that. You can't. Just do it. Not brought to you by Nike, I wish, but just do it, guys. Because there will be people along the way when you want to turn your back. I've said this story before. I got 2 stories to say before I end this podcast. Matter of fact, I brought the book I always bring up into studio. Matter of fact, not only do I have 1 copy, but it's one of my favorite books ever. This is the original, and this is the second one because it became the bestseller for the New York Times. I bought 2 copies of it because this is one of the most, I'm about to tear up. This is one of the most inspirational books I've ever read in my life. And within the first couple chapters, you see Derek Jeter at a young age go into his parents' bedroom, like 8, 9 years old, with a New York Yankees hat and his mitt on. And he looks at his parents, like midnight, 3 o'clock in the morning, and goes, I'm going to play shortstop for the New York Yankees one day. And you know what his parents said to him? You will, if you believe it. You know what happened to me one time? And for those of you diehards out there for Pure Evil MMA, you know what I'm about to say here. When I was young, I was in the car, and I'll never forget this. My stepfather told me, Ed, what do you want to do when you get older? My stepfather was a firefighter. My mother still is a nurse at Yale. And it was me, my stepfather, my mother, and my stepbrother. I even remember the street we were on in Brantford, passing Cedar Knolls off exit 54 in Connecticut off 95. on that back road right there. And my stepfather said, Ed, what do you want to do when you get older? What do you want to be? And I said, I want to be in the NFL. And at the time, I was on the all-star team for baseball. I was the captain of the football team. And he said, no, seriously, what do you want to do? Because you won't ever get in the NFL. You won't ever get in the MLB. You have to be realistic. And you know what's really messed up? I will never tell my children that. I understand his point and what he was trying to get across to me. But guess what? Somebody was next in line. There's always somebody next in line for what you want to do. And if you're good at it and you believe in yourself, and the people who are in that circle also agree that you can do something, that you're an asset, which I've had the high school football coaches come up to me when I was a freshman and say, you're going to be a great asset to Daniel Hand football. When you have people like that supporting you and you believe in yourself, somebody's next in line. Why not you? And that's something you need to answer for yourself. Why not you? Why can't you do it? What makes you different? Nothing makes you different. It's all up here. Pain is an illusion. Pain is an illusion. We get one ticket to ride. We get one ticket to ride to make our mark. And then that's it, guys. That's it. And not only do we get one ticket, but there's only a very small window that closes really quick between 18 and 35. Why not you? Ask yourself that. Why not you? Never give up. Don't listen to the doubters. Do what you want to do. With that being said, guys, I'm Evil from Pure Evil MMA. Remember, without evil, there's no purity. White knuckles till the end. Behave yourselves.